Greetings and welcome to By G105 Evolution 2022 edition. Pandemic induced online, at least for the beginning. And what we're doing today is we've already heard from the students with their lightning talks, in which each student that's part of the course tells us about how evolution fits into their worldview, and then Professor Victoria Orphan has also given her take on it, and this particular vignette is my answer to that question. So, what is evolution to me? So, I have about 20 slides, and it's a bit of a stream of consciousness in the sense that I'm just trying to give an indication of the way that evolution as a topic fits into my personal and professional life, and it definitely fits in a huge way into my personal life because one of life's greatest pleasures for me has always been being out in nature. So I'm going to start out with this video, which is about 2 minutes long. The music deeply moves me. The video itself moves me. Some of you will probably recognize it as so as I said, I find that just deeply moving. And I would say for me, every single clip, that's a series of clips, video clips, induces the two words, really, I wonder. And, one of the things that for the students in the course, we'll be handing out these little Write in the Rain notebooks. They're waterproof. I can pour water on this and draw on it. And one of the things we'll do when we're in the Galapagos is we'll sit down and in silence, 15 or 20 minutes at a time, all of us, and we'll look out upon the scene and we'll try to fill our notebooks with questions that start with the words, I wonder. So what is evolution to me? Well, so one of the things that it certainly touches on is one of the mysteries of mysteries, of which, there's so many, but helps us understand where did life come from. I would have to say that, there's everybody has their own criteria for deciding whether or not something is understood, and for me, this question remains in the realm of the mysterious for now. But for sure, evolution has to come to terms with where did life come from. A beautiful part of the subject of evolution that was for sure touched on in very deep ways by both Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace in their trips, and the whole subject of paleontology over the years has done a beautiful job of trying to give us a sense of the history of life on Earth. And evolution is the window onto what the fossil record means. What can we learn both from the molecular fossil record, the DNA fossil record, but also the explicit one that most of us are used to from a place like La Brea Tar Pits. Another thing that it means to me is it helps explain the unity of life. So, there's a quite an interesting balance between the diversity of life on the one hand and the unity of life on the other. And I think that, for me, my agenda, what I will try to push in this course or any course that I teach and in my own research and everything that I think about the study of living matter, is that not enough emphasis is put on the unity of life. I think that the diversity of life is great, and I'll have a few words to say about that, but I also think that the unity of life is deeply important. And, you see here several examples. On the left, the biological unity is revealed, for example, in the commonalities of the genetic code, descent with modification, the similarities, that's chunks of the sequence of hemoglobin from different organisms. Chemical unity, the use of nucleotide hydrolysis as an energy source, the glycolysis pathway. And then physical unity, which we won't touch on that much in this course, but the fact that, very important ideas such as linear relationships between flux and driving force, and the ability to use equilibrium thinking, even though one might think at first cut that has no place in biology. There's a genetic sense in which the unity of life is really quite amazing, where probably some of you know about this interplay between PAX6, which is a mouse gene that has to do with eyes and eyeless in flies, and the way that one can take the PAX6 gene and put it in flies, with the result that there will actually be fly eyes developed in places they normally don't belong. So, as I said, there's a counterpoint to this unity, which is that evolution helps us explain the diversity of life. And so, at the bottom I show, I think, something like 6 of my favorite organisms The first one on the left is from the Burgess Shale. The next one is Stella Humosa, the one with the shape of the Star of David, then Emiliana Huxleyi, and then a deep sea anglerfish, a Venus flytrap, and a blue whale. And I think that those examples just they highlight for us the diversity of life, and that's something I guess Darwin. Yeah. So my take on evolution is I'm quite interested in this notion of endless forms most beautiful, and as an opportunity to take a sort of quantitative view. So another sense that I think is quite interesting of what is evolution to me is it helps us understand what is the place in nature of humans. And there's a fossil record answer to that question, but there's also really interesting things that we know from genome science. And this might be an example that some of you are not familiar with, but I think it's really, really wonderful. Is humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, but other primates have 24. And that leads to the hypothesis that you can see in our chromosome 2 is a merger and of two other chromosomes. And this is just to highlight some of the key features, the telomeres, the replication origin, the centromere. And I just wanted to show you from this paper where they, as you can see, generation and annotation of the DNA sequences of human chromosome 2 and 4. Chromosome 2 is unique to the human lineage of evolution, having emerged as a result of head-to-head fusion of two acrocentric chromosomes. And what I wanted to say is that means there ought to be one inactivated centromere, which was found, and then there also should be some telomere sequences in the middle of the merged chromosome in humans. So, there's a lot of emphasis in biology on data, and that's great. But I am definitely of the mind that the objective scientifically ultimately is conceptual frameworks. I want to be able to have theoretical descriptions where many apparently disparate phenomena are brought under the same intellectual roof. And Dobzhansky, in this famous article, which I think you should read, Nothing in Biology Makes Sense Except in the Light of Evolution, it's really become a cliche, but nevertheless, that's the design specification of a potent theory, which is that nothing in some vast numbers of subjects makes sense except in light of that. So, in the world of light and electricity and magnetism, you could say nothing in electromagnetism makes sense except in the light of Maxwell's equations, which preside over this huge swath of phenomenology in the universe around us. And the same is true of of evolution in the biological context. Paul Nurse has written this article, The Great Ideas of Biology, which I think is worth your while to read. And in it, he gives a central place to evolution, which you can see. 4 of the great ideas of biology are discussed. The cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. The gene is the mechanism of heredity, evolution by natural selection, and life is chemistry. So what does evolution mean to me? I really love the idea about change over time. And, for me, evolution actually has its crowning achievement in the hands of Newton and Leibniz. The calculus is a story of evolution. It's telling us how to figure out about time evolution of mechanical systems and Newton's treatment of the planets and so on. That's really the first great law of evolution, which is, to parrot Kepler, is the music of the spheres. So if you look up evolution, in quantum mechanics, we learn about the time evolution operator. We talk about time evolution in statistical mechanics. We talk about time evolution in mechanics. And I'm just trying to say, this is not unique to biology. And it really refers to change over time. And so I just hope that the students in the course will be intrigued by not so much the factual backdrop to the living world, but rather to the unifying power of evolution as a way to understand that factual backdrop. What does evolution mean to me? It certainly means that I've lived through an evolutionary hurricane, and it's still going. It's the reason I'm sitting in my room here by myself talking about this stuff rather than in a classroom at Caltech. We're living through the evolution of a global pandemic as this virus, it explores. I think in one of the homeworks, I will have you try to work out that there's 20 million single base pair mutations at every site on the 30,000 nucleotide SARS-CoV-2 genome every night. In other words, every single day there are 20 million opportunities for a difference at a given site in that genome. So, and we have this huge reservoir of viruses, which is in the process of changing over time. What does it mean to me? It's certainly a prism through which I view travel, whether it's New Zealand and its biogeography, or Indonesia and the weirdness between Bali and Lombok, which is separated by the so-called Wallace Line, whether it's the Galapagos and the famed finches. We will talk about Darwin's thinking on the finches. In The Voyage of the Beagle, he noted, one might really fancy that from an original paucity of birds in this archipelago, one species have been taken and modified for different ends. So, that's really quite amazing. And, Peter and Rosemary Grant, they made this systematic 30, 40-year-long study of beaks of finches on the island of Daphne Major. And I'm not going to go into it now because I talk about it later, but, they basically measured the beak depth of these finches and try to understand its evolution. What is evolution to me? It helps me understand the origins of my favorite animals, which, I was just getting ready to go to Mexico, to Magdalena Bay to see the humpbacks for the winter. Unfortunately, because of COVID, I had to postpone the trip, but the upshot is that there's probably no animal that I'm more sympathetic to on the planet than whales. And, there's this beautiful story, which I will talk about later in the course, having to do with whale evolution. I certainly would love to know, what is it that whales are saying? They have a culture, I think it's fair to say. They have language. They communicate. I think maybe that's controversial to some people. I don't see why. So maybe finally, the notion of evolution is that it gives a quantitative view of what I'm going to call the great human experiment. So, for the last 100,000 years, human beings have become the stewards of the planet, and we've been impacting it. Steve Palumbi has this very interesting article, Humans as the World's Greatest Evolutionary Force. I think you should take a look at it and see what you think. Just last week, actually, E.O. Wilson died, but so did Thomas Lovejoy, probably less known to some of you, but he did this forest fragmentation project also over 30 years, in which as the Amazon forests were cut down, they would leave behind fragments of different sizes and then measure the biodiversity in those fragments over time in relation to E.O. Wilson and MacArthur's idea on area and species relationship. Also recently, Bob Payne died, and he, in the early 60s, undertook a study of Pysastor ocraceus up in the reefs of Washington, where he would remove sea stars from this one chunk of reef, and this led him to basically discover the notion of a keystone species. I think very, very important and interesting. This paper came out last year on the evolution of tusklessness in elephants in Africa, real-time evolution on the scale of our lives. So there was a civil war in Mozambique, and there was a lot of poaching going on, and over time, the tusklessness has ended up being an evolutionary outcome, I guess you could say. So there's measurable human impacts on the world all around us, and I'm very interested in the coupling between humans and their presence on Earth and evolution and the consequences of humans for evolution. So that'll be a theme that is relevant for me as far as what does it mean to me. So probably more than anything else, what I would say is that this course, Evolution, is a reminder for all of us to plug into our inner naturalist, to plug into our childlike fascination with the living world and how it became what it is, and to observe it and to try to understand what's going on as we watch. So, I really hope that all of you will take some time this term to go out and observe in silence, especially given that we're sort of under lockdown. It's a very nice time to go out with your little notebook and just sit in silence for 20 minutes and try to start sentences with the words, I wonder. So that's my take, my brief take on what evolution means to me.